Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jim Kleiber Show. As you can tell, I'm super excited today. Not at all. Today is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. I started late, 15 minutes. I was watching the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, and just reminded me how nice it felt, how relaxed I felt, how grateful I felt not to be so riled up by politics on a daily basis for the last, it's only been like 3 weeks. 3 weeks since Biden went into office. Watching this impeachment trial, it confuses me why they're trying to prove that he incited insurrection, not because I don't think he did it, but because I think it's very hard to prove direct speech acts when people don't directly say things. Or it's easy for people to weasel their way or kind of dance their way out of accusations on that. Whereas I think it's a much stronger argument to say that he was the only person who could have stopped this, socially, kind of emotionally, but also politically. He's the only one who could have made a decision to stop this by sending in more troops or sending in more reinforcements. And the fact that he did not stop it, I think, is more important than the fact that it is easier to prove, not more important, easier to prove than that he directly incited it. Again, not that I'm saying he didn't. I believe that he did, but I think it's hard to prove, especially when other people believe what they were doing was right. And the more that I watch this trial, the more that it just becomes more and more apparent to me that the problem with fights is that each side thinks they're right. Each side is doing it to protect other people. At least that's what they believe. Each side typically believes that they are doing this to protect the people that they care about, or the institutions or countries or organizations that they care about. And so people who went in there and stormed on the Capitol, it seems like they believed that what they were doing was not attacking the Constitution, but protecting the Constitution. I strongly disagree with this. And I'm trying to understand what they might have been believing, because coming in, if they believe that the election was stolen, then it would be their patriotic duty to come in and prevent the election from being stolen. If they truly believe that. That's what they believe their actions and their intentions would be. Now, for me, the struggle is, why do people believe this? What happened where people don't trust the electoral process, where people don't trust the voting process, where people don't trust the courts, where people don't trust the law enforcement, where people don't trust politicians, where people don't trust media, news outlets, where people don't trust so many of these different factors? What happened in their lives? And it makes me think of a Twitter, like a Twitter thread that I read the other day, where it was a woman talking to somebody about why they didn't want to get a vaccine. And it was a healthcare worker that didn't want to get a vaccine. And I think the woman was a doctor who was talking with her. And healthcare worker said, "Oh, I'm not going to get one." And the doctor didn't say, "Oh, you're stupid." The doctor just sat there and said, "Well, why don't you want to get one?" And she's like, "What, you don't think I'm stupid?" And she's like, No, we all have our reasons for behaving the way we do. So what are your reasons? Why don't you want to get one? She says, "I'm the only one in my family. She's like, "What do you mean?" "Well, I'm the one who provides everything, and I'm scared. Like, I don't want to take that risk and have something bad happen to me, and then I can't provide for the family." And I think, again, she was like, "Well, does that make me stupid?" The doctor was like, No, I mean, it says you care about your family. And then really walked her through it and really talked about it, and basically said she's not stupid for what she believes. She has her reasons, but also tried to open her up and show her that, the likelihood is that COVID itself is, I think at the end she said, I just want you to be more afraid of COVID-19 than you are of the vaccine. And I think maybe even the healthcare worker started crying in the conversation, and the woman consoled her. It was just, we have our reasons for believing the things that we do. And I'll be the first one to say that my gut reaction when somebody believes something that I think just doesn't make any sense is to be very condescending. And the question I ask myself, how could this person be so stupid? Like, that's a question I ask myself a lot, and I feel embarrassed to admit it. And it causes so much conflict in my life when I get to that point of like, oh, how could they be so dumb? How could they be so stupid? And I'm really trying to pull back and go, they're not dumb. They're not stupid. They're believing it for reasons. They're believing it for emotional reasons, things that have happened in their lives. What are those? How can I go deeper with this person and figure out what this person is actually feeling and help them talk about it and not judge them and still love them throughout the process? It's hard. It's so hard. It stresses me out. It frustrates me. It angers me. And yet I think we have to start trying to interact with each other on a deeper level, trying to open up and show our pain and open up and hear their pain. Sometimes it can be really hard to open ourselves up and hear things we don't want to hear about someone else's experience. I think it's so hard sometimes for us to relate on our beliefs. Our beliefs can go in so many different directions. I think it's much easier for us to relate and connect with people along emotions. So, the anger, the sadness, the excitement, the joy, the gratitude, the calm, the confusion, whatever other emotions come to mind or emotional phrases. I read something, I didn't read it, it was Washington Post, it was behind a paywall, I haven't read it yet, but it was talking about many of the people who stormed the Capitol, I think were having big financial troubles, or at least perceive that they're having strong financial troubles. And again, I wonder how much of our anger and vitriol towards one group is really related to some other problem that we're having underneath. How many of the people who think that the election was stolen are really, really struggling with some other aspect of life? Suicide or overdose or financial humiliation or romantic humiliation or so many other feelings, uncertainty, existential crises and things like this, that it comes out as hatred for or distrust of one other group. I don't know. And a lot of people jump on, and I'm sure if I post this on Facebook, people will say, "Oh, but you're only empathizing or trying to understand this one group. You're not looking at the pain of the other groups." And I think sometimes I don't state it so much because I think I feel more connected to those groups. Like I understand I feel more connected to the pain, I think, of a black mother who is worried that her son's going to get killed in the streets by the police officer. I think I feel more connected to that pain than I do to the person who thinks that the government stole the election from them. It's harder for me to understand that belief. It's easier for me to understand the belief that somebody doesn't trust the cops because they keep seeing people who look like them get shot in the streets. Like, it's much easier for me to understand that distrust, not understanding why people distrust those. I don't know. So a lot of times when I talk about this, I do emphasize a group that is probably more towards those who supported Trump, And I think it's because I personally struggle more to feel connected or feel related to them than I do to many of my friends, I would say, on the left. And I don't know. There's just, I think we have to do something. I think we have to do something to try to bring this country together, not in terms of punishment and law, but more in terms of on an emotional level. How do we actually start feeling closer to each other? How do we resolve some of this deep emotional conflict that we have that has been going on for years and escalating for years? And again, it's not to blame one side or the other, you know? I was in a conversation about, I think I was on Clubhouse in a conversation about slavery, and somebody asked the question, why don't white people get it or something? I don't know what the question, frankly, I can't even remember what the question was, but it was this idea that like, I think a white person was asking, why should we feel guilty for something that happened 200 years ago that my ancestors didn't do because I wasn't even in the country? So it wasn't me, it was just other white people. And my answer was, it's not our responsibility for what our ancestors did, for the conflict that they created, but it is our responsibility to resolve that conflict. So what can we do to resolve the conflict that we're having right now, even if it wasn't our fault for what happened in the first place? How can we step up and take the lead to bring resolution to that conflict, to bring people closer together? I have a friend. Hey, Jason, good to see you too, man. Yeah, glad you're watching. So what can we do to resolve that conflict? Instead of blaming people for what happened in the past, okay, this happened in the past, that happened in the past. Listen, in conflict, typically there are two sides are fighting. What do they say? It takes two to tango. Well, it takes two to fight most of the time. And what can we do now to resolve it? What can we do now to change the direction? And so I think no matter what happens with the outcome of this impeachment trial, we still will have a country that may feel very divided. And again, I think united and divided is more of a perception than it is a reality. How much do we perceive? How much do we believe? How much do we feel united with other people versus divided? How close do we feel to these other people? How much do we trust them? How much do we believe that they care about us? And no matter what happens in this impeachment trial, we'll still have that conflict bubbling underneath. There's still going to be with many people feeling feeling the divide between the urban and the rural areas, feeling the divide between the college educated and the non-college educated, see even how to describe that. I don't want to describe that in like college educated is the good thing and non-college educated is the bad thing, because people are educated in different ways, right? Someone who goes through the trades, or someone who learns an art or learns a craft. That's I think sometimes in society we prioritize college educated as the good thing and the rest of them are not so good or bad things. And anyway, so that's another divide, a divide between rich and not so rich, or poor. I don't like to say poor. Those who have a lot of money and those who don't have a lot of money. Divides between police officers and communities. How do we start feeling closer to each other? Because the more and more distant we feel, if we don't resolve it, it's just going to keep going. Hey, Ruby, thanks for the comments. Good to see you here. As we keep dividing, it just, I don't know. I think in the U.S. we have a tendency, and it's probably a tendency in many places around the world, where conflict will bubble up and we will say, it's not a big deal. Or we'll say it's a big deal in the moment, but then we'll shove it under the rug. We'll sweep it under the rug, metaphorically, and then we move on. We get distracted by other things. One thing they did talk about in this impeachment trial is that this attack on the Capitol building happened about a month ago, like 4 weeks ago. And there's a desire for many people, let's just move on. What happened, happened. Let's just move on. Like, let's talk about something else. The problem is when we don't actually talk about it, when we don't actually go to the root of what's going on, it will just stay there. It's very likely to stay there as unresolved conflict that will contribute to more conflict in the future. In other words, it is one thing that just pushes us further and further apart, or farther, if that's the proper word. But like, as we go farther apart, the challenge becomes when we have that next conflict, it may drive us farther and farther apart, to the point where we are maybe now, where some people believe that the election was stolen from them, and believe that the most patriotic thing they could do for the country is to go in and physically try to kidnap some of the people who are working in Congress. And other people believing that the election was completely fair and was one of the most secure ones that we've had, and despite all the COVID challenges, and believing that these other people were, one way to protect the country is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And so we have, and these people seem to think each side, the other person is evil and is trying to destroy everything, whereas it seems like both sides are just trying to protect. I don't know. I think I see this happen so many times in conflict, where people get angry at me for trying to empathize and see the humanity in both sides. Oh, what are you trying to see their humanity for? It's like, listen, I care about both of you, and I want to maintain my connection to both of you. I don't want to fall into one camp and then hate all these people, or fall into this camp and hate all these people. I don't know. I think part of me wants to blame us, and we need to get better at conflict resolution and this and that, but maybe we just haven't been taught how to do it. Maybe we've seen examples of mostly conflict avoidance, or maybe conflict will bubble up and then we avoid, and then it bubbles up and then we avoid, and then it bubbles up even higher and then we avoid. And I don't know if our justice system really brings that much resolution to conflict. And when I talk about resolution to conflict, what I really mean is, I don't know if it brings us closer to each other. I think resolving conflict often means that we actually come closer to each other. Not that we stay at the same distance, or not that we get farther apart, but about coming closer to each other. And I don't know if the current justice system that we have, the current retributive justice that many of us believe in, I don't know if that actually brings society closer together. But do we actually want to be closer together? Maybe we don't. I don't know. It's something that I've asked myself a lot when I talk about emotional connection, when I talk about emotional conflict. Do we actually want to feel closer to each other? Or is it actually, we like maintaining our independence and our distance and our privacy. We don't want other people knowing what's going on in our business. But then we get super lonely. I think the cure for loneliness is feeling connected to more people, and feeling closer to more people. But I don't know, maybe it's this paradox. We want to feel close to people, but as we feel close to people, we recognize the power in that, and the power that in those situations those people have to hurt us. And so we don't want to feel close to them, because if we're away, then we won't get hurt, but we also won't have joy. And so maybe it's just this, maybe we've been hurt so much that we don't want to feel so close to people, because we don't want to give them the chance to hurt us again. But when we don't have the pain, we don't also have the joy. I was reading about different forms of Buddhist meditation, and one guy was talking with, there's a sutra form, Sutrayana, I think it's called, But he said before doing Sutrayana, the first step is really did he call it abstinence? No, it was this idea of like reducing physical connection to food, to sex, to basically any kind of mortal pleasure in some ways. Is really just trying to separate from the pleasure, and then once we get rid of those physical, tangible drives, then it's to work on kind of the internal drives. And he said in that, the idea is that, and I'm just quoting him, it could be wrong, but the idea is that suffering is bad, and the more joy that we have, the more suffering we have, the more like good things that we have, the bad things we have. So the idea is to try to stop the good things, because we stop the good things, we'll therefore stop the bad things. So it's to try to make every good thing seem disgusting, and to try to feel repulsed by a lot of these good things. I don't know. And he says the challenge with that form is that it actually can create meditation where people become more zombie-like, where it is a disassociation and very strong disconnection from our feelings and our sensations and things like this. And maybe some of us want that. Maybe for some of us, the pain is too much that we no longer want to have the joy because the joy is causing that pain. I've seen this in relationships where somebody doesn't want to have the really strong emotional connection because it will lead to pain. The stronger attachment that we have, the stronger connection we have with something, can bring bliss and joy. And when that connection inevitably breaks, it can bring tremendous amounts of pain. So maybe many of us want to avoid this. I don't know. I just think that as a country, as a world, as a species, we, in many ways, we're closer than we ever have been in terms of the ability to communicate with people. But we feel more distant sometimes than we ever have. So I don't know. I'm going to go back and watch the impeachment trial. I'm grateful to have a couple friends jump in on this one, and I'm going to try to watch it through the lens of emotions and trying to imagine how the people who are speaking might be feeling and the people who are watching might be feeling across the spectrum, across the US, across other countries. So at least that might make me feel better and more connected to everyone else. If other people don't want to do that, I can't force it, but I know I feel really good when I feel close to people. So, all right, take care, y'all.